The first sound wasn't the mail truck's familiar rumble, but the shriek of the rusty mailbox hinge, a sound that ripped through the otherwise quiet Pennsylvania morning like a starting gun. My heart hammered against my ribs. Decision day. I'd been tracking the Ivy League notifications online like a woman obsessed, but the physical letter, that thick, cream-colored rectangle of fate, was everything. I practically flew down the stairs, a wild hope battling the tremor in my hands, only to freeze at the bottom step. Maya, my younger stepsister, was already there, a vision in a pastel sundress, plucking the mail from the box with an air of casual ownership, and in her hand, unmistakably, was the envelope, the one with the crimson crest of the university that had haunted my dreams for 4 years. A theatrical gasp escaped her lips as she tore it open, her eyes, wide and deceptively innocent, scanning the page. "Oh, my God," she breathed, her voice a pitch-perfect imitation of delighted shock. "Liv, you are not going to believe this. I got into an Ivy League." The world went silent, the chirping of sparrows, the distant hum of Mr. Henderson's lawnmower, even the frantic thumping of my own pulse. It all just stopped. It was like being plunged underwater, the pressure immense, the reality too stark to comprehend. My acceptance, my future, snatched, just like that. Maya, who'd once complained that The Great Gatsby had too many long words and whose idea of a challenging intellectual pursuit was mastering the latest TikTok dance. Her, in my dream school, the air crackled with the unspoken, the impossible. Her smirk, a tiny, almost imperceptible lift at the corner of her mouth as she met my gaze, was the only sound that registered. That, and the sudden, icy rage that began to bloom in the pit of my stomach, a dangerous, beautiful flower of fury. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a declaration of war. My name is Olivia Peterson. I'm 18, and for as long as I can remember, that Ivy League university wasn't just a goal, it was an escape hatch. It was the shimmering Oz at the end of a yellow brick road paved with straight A's. All-night study sessions fueled by gas station coffee, and a relentless, gnawing hunger to be someone, somewhere, other than Olivia Peterson from Oak Haven, Pennsylvania, a town where dreams usually went to die quietly on the vine. You know that feeling, that desperate need to prove not just to the world, but to yourself, that you're more than your zip code. That was me. Every debate tournament won. Every science fair project perfected. Every carefully crafted essay was a step closer to that acceptance letter. It wasn't just about a prestigious degree. It was about breathing air that didn't taste of regret and limited horizons. It was about a life I'd meticulously designed. And Maya had just taken a sledgehammer to the blueprints. The shock was a physical thing, a fist clenching in my chest, stealing my breath. But even through the ringing in my ears, tiny, insidious memories started to surface, like little shards of glass. Maya's recent, almost forensic interest in my application essays, her casual questions about notification timelines. Just curious. "Sis." She'd trilled, her eyes a little too bright. Then there was my stepmother, Susan, Maya's mother, with her saccharine smiles and a habit of patting my arm while delivering comments that felt more like tiny paper cuts. "Don't set your heart on those fancy places, Olivia dear," she'd said just last week, her voice dripping with false concern. "They're not always the right fit for girls like us." Girls like us. Right. And the coffee incident, just 2 weeks ago. Maya, all feigned clumsiness, had accidentally upended her latte all over my laptop, the very laptop that held all my final application drafts and research notes. At the time, I'd chalked it up to Maya being Maya. Now, it felt less like an accident and more like a calculated strike. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a truly ugly picture, The days that followed were a special kind of torment, a masterclass in smiling through a scream. Maya, naturally, transformed our small clapboard house into her personal victory stage. She was on the phone constantly, her voice, amplified by a sickeningly sweet triumph, echoing through the thin walls as she recounted her miraculous acceptance to anyone who would listen, and even those who wouldn't. Each congratulatory call, each gushing Facebook comment under her post, complete with a picture of my letter, was like a fresh twist of the knife. My dad, a man of quiet integrity but often oblivious to the subtle undercurrents in our blended family, seemed genuinely astounded by Maya's sudden academic leap. He'd clap her on the shoulder, a proud, puzzled smile on his face. "Well, I'll be." "Maya, girl, you're full of surprises, my stepmother." Susan, however, was a different story. Her performance was flawless. She radiated maternal pride, her eyes sparkling as she lauded Maya's hidden depths and fierce determination. But I saw the knowing glances she exchanged with Maya when they thought I wasn't looking, the almost conspiratorial air that hung between them. It was in those moments that the true, soul-crushing weight of the betrayal began to settle in. This wasn't just Maya's impulsive act of jealousy. This felt orchestrated. The pain was a constant companion, a dull ache behind my eyes, a tightness in my throat that made it hard to swallow. I replayed my high school years in my mind, a highlight reel of sacrifices. I saw myself hunched over textbooks on Friday nights. The distant thump of music from parties Maya was at a constant reminder of the normal teenage life I was missing. I remembered turning down a summer trip to the West Coast with my cousins, a trip I'd longed for because it conflicted with a crucial STEM camp that would look good on my applications. Maya had gone to the beach for a month. I'd even coached her through her SAT prep, patiently explaining algebra concepts she claimed were like totally irrelevant. The memory now burned like acid. All those moments I'd felt like an outsider in my own home, a studious ghost haunting the periphery of their laughter and easy living. Susan's voice would echo in my memory, dripping with that false solicitude. "Olivia, honey, you study too hard. You need to lighten up. Be more like Maya." As if Maya's effortless mediocrity was something to aspire to. The warnings signs had been there, like faint red flags I'd dismissed as paranoia. Maya's subtle put-downs disguised as jokes. Susan's constant comparisons. My sadness was a heavy, suffocating blanket. But beneath it, a different emotion was starting to stir. A cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about an acceptance letter. This was about my life, my future, my very identity. And they weren't going to get away with stealing it. Not if I had anything to say about it. And I did. I had an ace up my sleeve, a secret weapon they knew nothing about, the Stenton Fellowship. It was the university's most prestigious full-tuition scholarship, awarded to a handful of incoming freshmen who showed exceptional promise. The application was separate, the requirements stringent, and the final step was an intensive interview. Here's the kicker: I'd come down with a severe case of bronchitis the week of the on-campus interviews. I was devastated, convinced my chances were shot. But Ms. Davies, the head of admissions, had been incredibly understanding. They'd arranged a special video conference interview for me, just 2 days before the official notification letters were mailed. I remembered it vividly propped up in bed, voice raspy, but mind sharp. I'd presented my research proposal on the economic impact of early American canal systems. I'd answered tough questions from 3 panelists: Dr. Albright, a history professor whose work I deeply admired, Professor Peterson, a leading economist, and Ms. Davies herself. Despite the fever, I knew I'd connected with them. I'd seen the flicker of genuine interest in their eyes, the thoughtful nods. At the end of the nearly hour-long session, Dr. Albright had even commented, "Ms. Peterson, your passion for this subject is truly compelling." Maya, with her superficial understanding of, well, everything, wouldn't have a clue about any of this. She wouldn't know their names, the specific questions, the depth of the discussion. Her entire claim to that Ivy League spot rested on a piece of stolen paper. My claim rested on merit, on a documented unique interaction. Maya's ignorance quickly became her Achilles heel. In her haste to bask in stolen glory, she was sloppy. She posted on Instagram, posing with my letter. Can't wait to start my new life in New Haven this fall. Ivy-bound blessed. My dream school was in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, not New Haven. It was a small detail. Perhaps, but to me, it was a glaring neon sign advertising her fraud. Friends who knew of my ambitions started texting me, confused. Didn't you apply to Penn? Why is Maya saying Yale? Even my dad, bless his earnest heart, frowned when Maya, attempting to sound knowledgeable at dinner, mentioned looking forward to taking classes with that famous Professor What's-His-Name from a department that didn't even exist at the university. She was all smoke and mirrors, and the mirrors were starting to crack. The first real gut-wrenching surprise, the one that confirmed this wasn't just Maya's impulsive act, but a calculated conspiracy, came late one night. I couldn't sleep. My mind a chaotic storm of anger and anxiety. I crept downstairs for a glass of water, and that's when I heard it. Hushed voices from the den. Maya and Susan. Just be careful what you post, honey, Susan was saying, her voice a low murmur. We don't want any complications. The important thing is that the initial enrollment forms went through with your name. That temp contact in the records office really came through changing Olivia's primary contact email and rerouting the digital acceptance before overriding the mailing address. Olivia will just get a thin envelope. If anything, she'll assume she was rejected. My blood turned to ice. A temp contact rerouting digital acceptances, overriding mailing addresses. This was a premeditated plot, a sophisticated deception far beyond Maya's limited capabilities. Susan hadn't just encouraged Maya, she'd actively engineered the theft. That coffee spill on my laptop suddenly took on a far more sinister meaning. Had they been trying to access my files? My university portal login? The dismissive comments? The fake concern? It was all part of the act. The betrayal was deeper, darker, and far more venomous than I could have imagined. My own stepmother. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, but instead of making me crumble, it forged my anger into something cold, sharp, and utterly resolute. They had underestimated me. Badly. My grief hardened into a diamond-edged determination. This wasn't just about getting my spot back. This was about exposing a rot that went deeper than I knew. My first move was to meticulously gather my evidence. I compiled a digital folder, my complete, original application with its time-stamped submission receipt, my official high school transcripts, gleaming with a 4.0 GPA, glowing recommendation letters from teachers who'd championed my Ivy League aspirations for years, and the centerpiece a detailed summary of my Stenton Fellowship video interview. I listed the interviewers' full names and titles: Dr. Eleanor Albright, Professor David Peterson, and Ms. Patricia Davies. I transcribed key questions they'd asked about the socio-economic impact of the Schuylkill Navigation Company, and my detailed, nuanced answers. I even had the email chain with Ms. Davies' assistant confirming the special video arrangement, complete with dates and times. This was my fortress, impenetrable by Maya's lies. The next morning, my voice steady, my hand surprisingly firm, I dialed the main number for the university's Office of Admissions. I asked for Ms. Davies directly, but was routed to a senior admissions officer, Ms. Angela Dixon, who had a no-nonsense, efficient voice. I laid out my concern calmly, factually. Ms. Dixon, I began. My name is Olivia Peterson. I was an applicant for the fall semester and a candidate for the Stenton Fellowship. I have strong reason to believe that my acceptance and scholarship offer have been fraudulently claimed by my stepsister, Maya Henderson, using my credentials. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let emotion creep in. I simply stated the facts and offered to provide immediate, verifiable proof. I mentioned the unique circumstances of my video interview, the names of the panelists. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, Ms. Dixon said, her voice now sharpened with interest. The Stenton interviews are highly specific, Ms. Peterson, and we certainly keep detailed records of all finalist interactions. Please, email me everything you have. I will look into this personally and immediately. Within minutes, my carefully curated dossier was on its way to her inbox, including a polite note about Maya's geographically challenged Instagram post. The university's response was swift and decisive. Ms. Dixon, true to her word, launched an internal investigation. They had my original application, my IP address logs, the recording of my video interview. They cross-referenced Maya's details, or lack thereof, against the Stenton Fellowship records. The discrepancies were glaring. Maya had never been a candidate, had never interviewed. The digital trail also quickly exposed the unauthorized changes to my applicant portal, the altered email, the rerouted digital notifications, all traced to a temporary IP address that didn't match any of my previous legitimate access points. The first sign of Maya's unraveling came when she tried to complete her course registration. She called Susan, her voice tight with panic, audible even through the closed den door. They're asking me about my preliminary course preferences for the Stenton Honors Seminar. What even is that? And they need a follow-up essay on my proposed research. Olivia never said anything about that. My father, who had been trying to remain optimistic, started to look deeply troubled by Maya's increasing agitation and obvious lack of knowledge. The official summons for Maya to attend an urgent academic review meeting with the Dean of Admissions arrived via courier a few days later. Susan insisted on accompanying her, her face a mask of false bravado. My father, his expression grim, said he was going too. This was my moment. As they stood in the hallway, coats on, a palpable tension filling the air, I stepped forward. "Before you go defend Maya's miraculous achievement," I said, my voice clear and resonant in the sudden silence, "there are a few things you all need to see." In the cold light of our living room, with Maya starting to tremble and Susan's eyes darting nervously, I laid it all out. The stolen letter, the Stenton Fellowship, the video interview Maya knew nothing about. Then, the bombshell, I recounted the conversation I'd overheard between Maya and Susan, detailing their plan, the manipulation of my online portal, the temp contact, my father's face, already strained, turned ashen. He stared at Susan, a look of profound shock and dawning betrayal in his eyes. Susan spluttered, "Olivia, you're twisting things. You're just jealous of Maya's success." But her voice lacked conviction. Her gaze wouldn't meet my father's. Maya just crumpled onto the ottoman, tears streaming down her face, her carefully constructed world imploding. I just wanted it so much," she sobbed. The meeting at the university, I later learned from my father, was a swift, brutal demolition of Maya's lies, faced with Ms. Dixon, the dean, and the irrefutable evidence of my video interview and academic record. Maya's story disintegrated. She couldn't name a single interviewer, couldn't articulate a coherent thought about the academic field she supposedly excelled in. Within the hour, her fraudulent enrollment was nullified. The second, and perhaps more shocking, surprise emerged from the university's now expanded investigation into the digital breach of my applicant portal. They discovered that Maya and Susan hadn't just targeted my Ivy League acceptance. In their desperate attempt to secure Maya any college admission that would impress, they had also created a counterfeit high school transcript for Maya, sprinkled with some of my academic achievements and extracurriculars. This forged document had been submitted to one of my safety schools, a reputable state university where I had also received an acceptance and a smaller scholarship. They had been trying to steal that from me too, as a backup plan. That accidental coffee spill on my laptop weeks earlier, Ms. Dixon theorized it was a clumsy attempt to access my detailed school records, perhaps to make the forgeries more convincing. This wasn't just about one stolen letter. It was a calculated, multi-pronged assault on my future, the university, legally obligated, reported the transcript fraud to the relevant authorities. The net was closing in, and it was far wider than Maya or Susan had ever anticipated. My father, a man whose moral compass was resolute, was utterly devastated by this revelation of systematic deceit. He moved into the guest room that night, the chasm between him and Susan suddenly vast and likely irreparable. My victory wasn't a sudden explosion of fireworks, but the quiet, steady dawn after a long, brutal night. The official, beautifully embossed letter from the university, reaffirming my admission and the full stint in fellowship, arrived a week later, holding it, feeling the weight of the paper, the crispness of the ink, was like taking my first deep, clean breath in months. I stood in my sun-drenched bedroom, the university pennant I'd optimistically bought years ago, now proudly tacked above my desk. Their world of lies was a distant, fading shadow. The university handled Maya's situation with quiet efficiency. Her fraudulent enrollment was expunged as if it never existed. The legal consequences of the transcript forgery began to unfold. A slow, grinding process that cast a pall over Maya and Susan's lives in Oakhaven, a town that thrived on gossip. Their carefully constructed facade of suburban respectability was shattered. Susan, once a queen bee in her social circle, became a pariah. My father initiated divorce proceedings. The family, as I knew it, was irrevocably broken, but perhaps it was a break that needed to happen, a lancing of a festering wound. Looking back, the fight had been the hardest thing I'd ever done. The betrayal by Maya, my own sister, stung deeply. But Susan's cold, calculated complicity, that was a wound that would take much longer to heal, if ever. The first surprise, her active role in the deception, had shattered my remaining naivety about the complexities of family. The second surprise, the extent of their fraud with the counterfeit transcript, revealed a shocking depth of desperation and malice. It solidified my resolve that they needed to face the full consequences, not just for me, but for the integrity of the system they'd tried to corrupt. There was no simple, clean joy in this victory. It was a heavy triumph, weighted with loss and the bitter taste of experience. But beneath it all, there was a profound sense of rightness, of reclaiming what was mine, and a dawning awareness of my own strength. I had faced them down, and I had won. My relationship with my father, forged anew in the fires of this ordeal, was stronger, more honest than ever before. A month later, I stood on the iconic Locust Walk, the heart of the University of Pennsylvania's historic campus in Philadelphia. The late August air buzzed with the excited chatter of new students, the rustle of leaves in ancient elm trees, the distant chime of the library clock. It was everything I had dreamed of, yet it felt different, more real, more earned. The path here hadn't been the smooth, triumphant march I'd once envisioned. It had been a detour through a dark, thorny wood, but I had emerged, not unscathed, but stronger, more discerning, as I walked towards the towering arches of College Hall. My acceptance letter, the real one, tucked safely in my bag. I felt a sense of profound, quiet power. The shadows of Oakhaven, of Maya's jealousy and Susan's deceit, were finally behind me. Ahead lay a future I would build myself, on a foundation of truth, resilience, and an unwavering belief in my own worth. The lessons had been harsh, but they were mine now, embedded in the very fiber of my being, as I stepped forward into the bright, beckoning light of my new beginning.